A wealthy man leaves his partner behind, only to encounter her years later, now a mother of quadruplets, and seeks to claim her children for himself. Yet her actions leave him in disbelief. Before we embark on this narrative journey, feel free to share your thoughts below. From where are you tuning in? Delight in the tale, everyone. In the bridal suite, Claire meticulously adjusted her veil, while her best friend, Emily, offered words of comfort. The ceremony ought to have commenced by now. He has deep feelings for you, Claire. He's simply delayed because he strives for perfection, Emily remarked, though even she appeared somewhat uncertain. Yet Claire was aware. There was an unsettling feeling in the air. Richard was never one to arrive after the expected time. She stole another look at the clock, a constriction tightening in her chest. Each moment stretched on endlessly. At last, the priest made his entrance into the room. His grave demeanor validated Claire's deepest anxieties. I apologize, Miss Claire. We've been informed that Richard will not be attending. The words struck Claire with the force of a punch. Her legs trembled, yet she clung to the table for support. Her makeup was ruined as tears cascaded down her cheeks. This is impossible. It has to be a misunderstanding, she said, her voice quivering. Without pausing for a response, Claire dashed out of the church. As she hurried down the aisle, the guests cast inquisitive glances in her direction. The shame was suffocating, yet the agony was far more intense. Upon arriving at the parking lot, she paused, her eyes scanning the area in a frantic search for Richard. However, he was absent. She gazed at the sky, struggling to hold back her tears. Yet all that enveloped her was a profound sense of humiliation and anguish. Thoughts surged through her consciousness like a tempest. What is the reason? What mistake did she make? Suddenly, a conversation from 2 weeks prior came rushing back to her mind. She clearly remembered the faraway look in his eyes as he grasped her hand. Do you really want to go through with this? He inquired abruptly, shattering the stillness. Absolutely, Claire responded, a look of confusion crossing her face. We truly care for one another, don't we? Richard paused for a moment, but a smile gradually spread across his face. It was a delicate smile, one that Claire failed to see as a sign of caution back then. In the here and now, Claire perched on the curb, her white dress cascading around her. Silent tears traced down her cheeks. The shame and suffering were intolerable. She longed to fade away. Across the street, concealed within a vehicle, Richard observed her intently. He cradled his phone, the echoes of his mother's words swirling in his thoughts. This union isn't what you require, Richard. Contemplate what lies ahead. This union is destined to fail. He cast his eyes downward, wrestling with a heavy sense of remorse. He understood the weight of his actions, knowing they were beyond redemption. Yet he lacked the bravery to confront Claire or the burdens of others' expectations resting upon him. Claire brushed away her tears, inhaled deeply, and resolved to take action. She would depart. She refused to allow anyone to perceive her as a victim. Meanwhile, Richard lingered in the car, observing her from a distance, fully aware that this moment marked the start of an irreversible journey. The morning following the ill-fated wedding, Claire departed from the city. There were simply departures, devoid of words, devoid of clarity, devoid of any clash. She boarded a bus, seeking distance from all that surrounded her. With each passing mile, the weight of yesterday's memories bore down on her, intensifying her sorrow. Yet she understood the necessity of pressing on. Remaining was out of the question. The initial months were challenging. In a quaint, unfamiliar town, Claire secured a modest room, began her journey at a cafe, and each day, she endeavored to piece her life back together. Yet the ache persisted, accompanied by a feeling of defeat. Everything appeared to fall apart until one day, an unforeseen event transformed her life eternally. 2 months later, Claire had been experiencing an unsettling sensation for weeks. Morning nausea, overwhelming tiredness, and an unshakable feeling that things had changed. She attributed it to stress and the burden of all she'd endured, until, in a fleeting moment of uncertainty, she purchased a pharmacy test. That evening, Within the confines of her modest bathroom, Claire gazed at the confirmation. The results came back positive. Her heart pounded in her chest. A whirlwind of fear and joy surged within her. A portion of her felt a surge of anxiety at the idea of nurturing a child by herself, devoid of support, and with no family close at hand. Yet, concurrently, an unforeseen feeling of direction emerged. This child represented her opportunity for renewal, a motivation to persevere. The subsequent days revolved entirely around adaptation. Claire arranged a medical appointment, and the weight of reality began to dawn on her. Yet, nothing could have truly equipped her for the instant when the doctor, wearing a gentle smile, gazed at the ultrasound monitor and declared, "Congratulations, Claire. It is 4 o'clock." She blinked, a look of bewilderment crossing her face. 4? Quadruplets, the doctor said with a steady voice. Claire sensed the world whirl around her. It exceeded all her expectations, surpassing anything she believed she could manage. "Am I capable of accomplishing this?" she inquired, unaware that her words had escaped her lips. The physician offered a gentle smile. Mothers have an uncanny ability to navigate any situation. Upon learning of her pregnancy, Claire realized that a transformation was essential. Her tiny space had become insufficient. She meticulously collected every cent she made at the cafe and successfully secured a quaint little house on the fringes of town. It was modest, yet sufficient for her and her future offspring. In the meantime, those around her started to recognize her remarkable strength. Despite caring for babies, Claire dedicated herself to her work as much as possible. She juggled her schedule among medical appointments, her work, and getting the house ready. Every little victory marked progress in her fresh adventure. Yet, there were challenging days, evenings when she wept in solitude, burdened by the heaviness of it all. Doubts lingered, fears crept in, and that persistent question echoed in the mind. Would Richard care if he knew? She cast aside the thought each time it emerged, concentrating solely on the tasks at hand. The revelation of the quadruplets, surprising as it may have been, infused Claire with a fresh sense of resilience. She realized that having endured her past, she was capable of confronting any challenge ahead. Her children would always come first, and no one, not even Richard, could alter that fact. Time slipped away from Claire more swiftly than she had anticipated. Amidst the whirlwind of hospital visits and the chaos of organizing the house, she found herself struggling to find a moment to truly process everything. At last, the day had come. The delivery presented its challenges, yet all 4 babies arrived into the world in good health. As Claire cradled each one in her arms, an unfamiliar sensation washed over her, something she had never encountered before. Unadulterated affection. That moment dispelled any remaining uncertainties. From that moment forward, she understood she would go to any lengths for them. 5 years went by, and Claire had embraced her role as a single mother of quadruplets. The previously serene house was now alive with laughter, a whirlwind of chaos, and toys strewn about in every corner. Every boy possessed a distinct character. Lucas was the inquisitive soul, perpetually seeking answers. Noah possessed a quiet demeanor, yet his warmth and tenderness shone through remarkably. Liam had a knack for humor, effortlessly bringing smiles to everyone around him. Oliver took charge, effortlessly rallying his brothers into their playful antics. The routine was draining, yet Claire found a sense of satisfaction. She dedicated herself to supporting her family, balancing several jobs with unwavering commitment. Regardless of the challenges she faced, she maintained her composure and never voiced a single complaint. Every grin from her sons served as a poignant reminder of her purpose to persevere. Yet, life always holds its surprises. On a seemingly typical afternoon, while Claire led the boys to the park for some playtime, she spotted an unexpected face from her past. She stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. Richard was present. He sat on a bench, engaged in conversation with someone. Yet, a shift occurred in his demeanor as his gaze locked onto Claire's. He cast a quick look at the 4 boys playing nearby, and the similarity was unmistakable. The long-anticipated reunion that Claire had dreaded had finally come to pass. Claire stood motionless, her gaze locked on Richard, as her children frolicked carefree in the playground. He stood just a few meters away, yet to her it seemed like an endless stretch of time. It felt as though time had come to a standstill. Richard's eyes were fixed on her for a moment, but then he turned his attention to the boys darting across the grass, their laughter ringing out as they raced toward the slide. Their likeness to him was unmistakable. Claire sensed her heart pounding in her chest. She had to depart before Richard could make his way toward her. With her bag in hand and a flutter of anxiety beneath the surface, she called out to the boys. "Lucas, Noah, Liam, Oliver, let's go. It's time to head home," she said, her voice rising just a bit above the norm. The boys voiced their objections naturally, pleading for additional time to enjoy their game. However, Claire's assertive demeanor was sufficient to sway them. As Claire encouraged them to move quickly, they started collecting their toys strewn across the park. Just as she was about to move forward, a commanding voice called out from behind her. "Is that you, Claire?" She stood still. The sound, both recognizable and laden with doubt, caused her stomach to twist uneasily. With deliberate grace, she pivoted, locking eyes with Richard's piercing stare. He appeared distinctly perplexed, yet there was an additional layer to his expression, a blend of astonishment and skepticism. "Richard," she whispered, attempting to appear nonchalant but utterly failing. "Are those your children?" He gestured towards the boys, who remained absorbed in their toys. Claire paused, a flush creeping across her cheeks. She understood that evading this conversation was no longer an option. "Indeed, they are my children," she responded, striving to maintain her composure. Richard moved in a bit, his gaze darting between her and the kids. He appeared to take his time in absorbing the information. "What is their age?" he inquired, even though the response was clearly evident. Claire bit her lip, striving to maintain her composure. 5. Richard's demeanor shifted, felt like a blow to the gut. He parted his lips as if to speak, but then fell silent once more, grappling with the weight of the moment. "Are they? Is it mine?" The inquiry emerged softly, barely audible. Claire sensed the earth vanish from under her feet. She had envisioned this moment for years, but now that it had arrived, words eluded her. She chose to be direct. "Indeed, Richard, they belong to you." The ensuing silence was nearly intolerable. Richard raked his fingers through his hair, a familiar sign of anxiety that Claire recalled vividly. He glanced over at the boys, who were now observing her with intrigue, aware that something was unfolding. "Why didn't you share that with me?" he inquired, his voice thick with a blend of frustration and pain. "You abandoned me, Richard," Claire said, folding her arms defensively. "You left without saying a word. In solitude, I faced humiliation, carrying the weight of new life within me. What were your expectations of me?" Richard blinked several times, searching for the right words to say, yet remained quiet. He understood that she was correct. There was no justification for his actions. "I must meet them," he declared, shattering the stillness. Claire reflexively withdrew. "It's more complex than that, Richard. They remain unaware of your identity. What's stopping us? I am their father." Their resonance filled Claire's thoughts, igniting a wave of fury and sorrow. She advanced, locking her gaze with his. "Father, you truly cannot grasp the essence of being a father, Richard. You were absent during those restless nights when I pondered over how to settle the bills. You missed the moment when I had to manage 4 infants simultaneously, completely by myself. Father, please, this isn't a joke." Richard took a deep breath but remained steadfast. He understood that Claire had a point, yet he felt compelled to keep the dialogue going. "I recognize that I erred. However, that doesn't alter the reality that they are my children as well. I deserve to understand them, Claire. Isn't that so?" Claire released a sardonic chuckle. "You relinquished that privilege the moment you abandoned me at the altar." As the two engaged in their debate, Lucas, the most inquisitive of the quadruplets, drew near and gently pulled at his mother's dress. "Mommy, who is this person?" he inquired, his large, warm eyes glimmering with intrigue. Claire gazed at her son, a heavy feeling settling in her chest. Before she could respond, Richard lowered himself in front of the boy, his expression gentle for the first time since he arrived. "Hello, my friend. I'm Richard," he said, a tentative smile playing on his lips. Lucas inclined his head, observing the unfamiliar figure. "Are you familiar with my mother?" Richard let out a soft chuckle, casting a glance at Claire before responding. "Absolutely, I do." Claire inhaled deeply and softly pushed Lucas aside. "Why don't you go have some fun with your brother, darling? Mother will arrive shortly." Lucas paused for a moment, but ultimately complied. Claire faced Richard once more, her serious demeanor re-emerging. "One cannot simply arrive and assume that all issues will be settled. This isn't how it operates." Richard shook his head in disbelief. "I'm not requesting a complete solution at this moment. But I'm not leaving, Claire. This isn't the moment." Claire was engulfed by a surge of anxiety. She understood that Richard was not the type to surrender without a fight. Following that day, Claire came back home with the boys, her heart weighed down. As she gently tucked them into bed, her mind raced with anticipation of what lay ahead. Despite her deep desire to shield her children, she understood that it was futile to try to keep Richard at bay now that he was aware of the truth. In a lavish apartment on the other side of town, Richard gazed out the window, lost in thought. He reflected on the boys, on Claire, and on the possibilities of how life might have unfolded differently had he chosen another path years earlier. After an extended period, he sensed a compelling urge to set things straight. Claire hardly had a moment to catch her breath after the surprising encounter with Richard when, just a few days later, a knock echoed at her door. She opened it, and once more he stood before her. This time, he appeared even more resolute, his expression a blend of remorse and determination. "Claire, we must have a conversation," he stated directly. "There's nothing left to discuss, Richard," she said, her arms crossed defiantly. "I won't go until we accomplish this." The air was thick with unspoken words, and Claire understood that she could not dodge the inevitable discussion for much longer. Just as she was about to shut the door, Lucas emerged in the hallway, observing with keen interest. "Mommy, look, it's that guy from the park." Claire attempted to offer a smile to her son, yet Richard took advantage of the opportunity. "Greetings, my young friend," he said, lowering himself to Lucas' level. "I go by Richard." With a curious tilt of his head, Lucas leaned in, but Claire swiftly stepped in to redirect the moment. "Lucas, please return to your room, darling. Mommy will arrive shortly," she stated with conviction. As soon as Lucas departed, she faced Richard, her annoyance unmistakable. "It's not as simple as just arriving and having a conversation with them, Richard. Claire, they are my children. I deserve to know them," he replied, his tone unwavering. "Isn't that so?" She released a harsh, sardonic laugh. "You forfeited that privilege the moment you abandoned me at the altar. I brought these boys up by myself. You have no idea what it means to lose sleep, to give up everything for them, and now you believe you can just appear as if nothing ever occurred?" Richard inhaled deeply, visibly striving to maintain his calm. He understood that Claire had a point in numerous respects, yet he was acutely aware that turning his back was not an option. "I recognize that I erred. I'm not looking to excuse my actions, yet it remains true that they are my children as well." Claire felt a constriction in her chest. Her desire was to shield them from all harm. Yet, she was aware that Richard was not the type to yield without a fight. "What is it that you seek, Richard?" she inquired, weary. "I desire to understand them, to share moments with them. Is that really too much to request?" He gazed at her with sincere purpose. "It feels overwhelming. They have no idea who you are, and I won't allow you to interfere with their lives," she stated resolutely. Richard paused, the silence stretching uncomfortably, before uttering the very words that sent a chill through Claire's heart. "If this opportunity isn't granted to me, I will pursue legal action." The words struck Claire with the force of a punch. The stillness that enveloped Claire's modest home after Richard left was nearly overwhelming. He had explicitly stated that if she refused to let him be involved in the boys' lives, he would pursue every legal avenue at his disposal. Claire made an effort to maintain her composure, yet she was acutely aware that the challenge ahead would be formidable. Several days passed before the summons finally arrived. Richard initiated legal proceedings seeking joint custody. Claire sensed the earth vanish from beneath her feet. Her initial response was one of indignation. After 5 years of absence, he suddenly sought parental rights. It was utterly perplexing to her. In a moment of urgency, Claire reached out for assistance. Amelia was the first person she sought out, a seasoned attorney and a friend of many years. In the cozy confines of Claire's petite kitchen, they deliberated over her choices. Claire, we must face the facts. He possesses wealth, assets, and a formidable legal team. Yet you possess something he lacks, a tale of unwavering commitment. Amelia remarked, going over the summons documents, that you've been there for the boys every single day. What if that falls short? Claire inquired, her hands shaking as they gripped the coffee cup tightly. It shall be. We will battle with all our strength. The initial phase involves constructing your protection. We will collect all necessary evidence, testimonies, and anything else required to demonstrate that you are the most suitable individual to provide for their needs. Claire nodded, yet the burden of the impending conflict lingered oppressively around her. She understood the imperative to safeguard her children, no matter the sacrifice required. As the initial hearing approached, Claire stepped into the courtroom, accompanied by Amelia. On the opposite side, Richard stood alongside his attorney, and to her astonishment, Stella, his betrothed. A torrent of fury coursed through Claire as she laid eyes on her. Stella appeared completely relaxed, as if this were merely another gathering among friends. The attorney for Richard commenced the arguments. He highlighted that Richard possessed the means to offer the boys an improved life, access to quality education, financial security, and a safe environment. As he spoke, Claire sensed a constriction in her chest. The phrases were refined and meticulously practiced, yet she understood that the truth was a stark contrast to their assertions. As Amelia took her turn, she expressed herself with assurance. Your Honor, my client has devoted herself entirely to her children. She nurtured them alone, confronting challenges that many would find difficult to bear. Mr. Richard might possess wealth, yet Miss Claire holds something infinitely more precious. A deep emotional connection forged over years of love, sacrifice, and steadfast commitment. The judge attentively considered the arguments presented by both parties and, following the hearing, concluded that additional inquiry was necessary prior to making a determination. He instructed a social worker to assess the living conditions at both Claire's and Richard's residences. Following the hearing, Richard made his way to Claire in the hallway. He appeared weary yet resolute. I have no intention of separating the boys from you, Claire. He expressed his desire to be included in their lives with a serene demeanor. You might claim otherwise now, but it was your suggestion to bring this to court. That doesn't reflect the behavior of someone seeking a peaceful resolution. She responded, her frustration just beneath the surface. Stella emerged from the shadows, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. We're simply ensuring the boys receive what they rightfully deserve, Stella remarked with a frosty smile. Claire felt a surge of anger. What they truly need is a sense of security and affection. Things I have consistently provided for them. Your advice isn't necessary, Stella. Without pausing for a reply, Claire pivoted and strode away, striving to dismiss the gnawing sensation that this conflict was far from resolved. As time passed, the atmosphere became increasingly charged. Stella's presence grew increasingly overwhelming. Initially, she began attending the boys' school events, always elegantly attired, exchanging smiles with fellow parents, and making efforts to connect with the teachers. Subsequently, whispers started to emerge suggesting that Claire was an inattentive mother, a story evidently propagated by Stella. Let's enjoy ourselves a bit with those who focus solely on the comments. Drop a pizza emoji in the comments. Only those who reach this point will truly get it. Let us proceed with the narrative. The circumstances deteriorated as the whispers found their way to the press. Articles started to emerge depicting Richard as a dedicated father striving to compensate for lost time, while Claire was characterized as an unwilling mother who resisted sharing parenting duties. Claire experienced the sharp edge of public scrutiny, yet she remained resolute in her determination. Amelia, however, observed that Stella's meddling extended far beyond mere gossip. In a dialogue with Claire, she revealed her doubts. Stella is not merely offering her assistance to him. There's an advantage for her in this situation. Richard may be oblivious, but Amelia pointed out that she's orchestrating things to guarantee your loss of the boys. Do you believe she desires something deeper? Claire inquired, taken aback. I'm convinced that if she can eliminate you from the equation, she'll have Richard entirely at her mercy. Amelia asserted that this is more about power than love. Claire recognized that Amelia had a point. Stella exuded a perilous charm, and to overlook her would be a grave error. The social worker's visit was yet another moment filled with tension. Claire arranged her home with great attention to detail, making sure every corner reflected the joy and care that surrounded her children. In the course of the interview, the boys candidly shared insights into their daily routines, the games they enjoyed, and the affection they experienced from their mother. The social worker appeared to admire Claire's commitment, yet Claire was aware that he would also be making a visit to Richard. At Richard's residence, the atmosphere was strikingly distinct. Stella had meticulously orchestrated every detail to ensure it all seemed flawless. The children's room gleamed with cleanliness, adorned with lavish toys that the boys had never encountered before. In the course of the interview, Richard endeavored to maintain a calm facade, yet Stella's commanding presence and well-prepared responses drew the social worker's scrutiny. Her actions sparked doubt. As the report came in, a definitive conclusion remained elusive, yet Claire sensed a subtle triumph in the dawning revelation surrounding Stella's reality. Nonetheless, the pressure remained relentless. Richard persisted in his desire to be involved in the boys' lives, whereas Stella took every opportunity to sabotage Claire. The struggle was just beginning, and Claire understood that she would require every ounce of her strength to safeguard her children. The day of the trial dawned, and Claire had spent the night in restless anticipation. She fretted over the boys, their destinies, and the uncertainties that awaited them. As she stepped into the courthouse, Amelia beside her, she inhaled deeply, taking in the sight of the crowded room. With unwavering resolve, Claire faced the multitude of gazes directed at her. She mustn't reveal any vulnerability at this moment. Across the room, Richard occupied a seat next to Stella and his attorney. He seemed composed, yet Claire was aware that he felt nervous as well. Stella, on the other hand, radiated assurance. Her posture, her gaze, every detail about her radiated a sense of triumph, as if she had already emerged victorious from the struggle. The judge commenced the hearing by examining the report provided by the social worker. Claire absorbed every word as Amelia laid out her argument, emphasizing the countless years of commitment Claire had shown as a devoted single mother. The narrative unfolded with themes of sacrifice and unwavering love, a profound truth that resonated deeply within Claire. However, once Richard's attorney started to speak, the atmosphere changed completely. He contended that Richard possessed the means and resources to grant the boys a superior life, illustrating a vision of stability, comfort, and opportunity. Elements he asserted Claire could not provide to the same extent. As she listened, Claire sensed a tightness in her throat. She recognized that Richard's argument held weight, yet she understood that the deep emotional connection with her children was invaluable, something that wealth could never replicate. As Richard prepared to face the questions, Amelia rose, smoothing out her blazer with a practiced grace. She began with straightforward inquiries. "Mr. Richard, would you mind sharing your reasons for leaving Claire 5 years ago?" Richard paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. The stillness in the room grew thick with anticipation before he finally responded. My mother persuaded me that the timing wasn't quite right. She expressed that the union would be a misstep, emphasizing the importance of prioritizing my professional path. A whisper rippled among the onlookers in the courtroom. Claire's cheeks burned with fury. Richard's words validated her deepest anxieties. The decision had not been made in isolation. Amelia swiftly moved on, not lingering to delve deeper. So you abandoned Claire at the altar due to your mother's influence? Is that accurate? Richard inhaled deeply, his discomfort evident. Indeed, the ultimate choice rested with me. I paid attention to her words. Amelia maintained his gaze resolutely before proceeding. And what about Stella? Was she involved in that decision at all? Richard blinked, momentarily taken aback by the inquiry. He cast a quick look at Stella, who kept her face impassive, yet a hint of discomfort flickered in her eyes. He shook his head in disbelief. Stella was not involved at all. Amelia took a step back, yet Claire sensed there were deeper layers waiting to be revealed. The reference to Stella hung heavily in the atmosphere, an unspoken weight that everyone appeared reluctant to confront at that time. As Claire stepped onto the witness stand, the air in the room transformed once more. She shared the sacrifices she had endured, detailing how she had raised the boys on her own, without any support, and the deep love she held for them. I have poured my heart and soul into ensuring my children experience a joyful and secure life. I might not possess a great deal, yet I have consistently poured my heart into everything I do. These boys inspire me to persevere each and every day. Claire's words moved many in the courtroom to tears. Even Richard seemed unsettled, while Stella looked agitated, murmuring something to Richard's attorney. Perceiving the escalating tension, the judge requested a break. As the session continued, Amelia sought to summon a new witness. The courtroom doors swung open, unveiling a figure Claire had not laid eyes on in years. Morgan, who once served as the housekeeper for Richard's family. She entered the room with a measured pace, her cane guiding her steps, yet her eyes sparkled with unwavering resolve. Richard's body stiffened, and Stella turned her eyes away. Morgan ascended to the stand and commenced to articulate their thoughts. She shared her 2 decades of experience with Richard's family and detailed the events she observed in the days preceding the wedding. Her voice exuded tranquility, yet her words held profound significance. Richard's mother orchestrated the entire situation. She persuaded him that Claire didn't meet the standards for their family. She exploited his insecurities, claiming that the marriage would jeopardize his career and that Claire lacked the social status they anticipated. The revelations created a buzz in the room. Claire sensed a constriction in her chest as she absorbed the sounds around her. Although she had long held her suspicions, the confirmation struck her with a pain that was deeper than she had anticipated. Morgan pressed on, recounting the snippets of dialogue she had caught and illustrating how Richard's mother dictated every facet of his existence. However, Morgan hesitated before disclosing something even more astonishing. Stella was part of it as well. She had a strong bond with Richard's mother and endorsed the notion that he ought to distance himself from Claire. She supported his choice. The stillness in the room was swiftly disrupted by whispers. Richard faced Stella, taken aback. He appeared to grapple with understanding what he had just been told. "That's not true," Stella exclaimed, standing abruptly. The judge struck his gavel, demanding silence in the courtroom. Richard glanced at Stella, uncertainty clouding his gaze. "Were you aware of all this?" he inquired, his tone subdued yet laden with skepticism. Stella attempted to mask her feelings, yet the anxiety etched on her face revealed the truth. The witness was let go, yet the resonance of her words remained palpable. The session was paused to allow the judge time to examine the new information. Claire exited the courtroom, Morgan accompanying her, as she attempted to make sense of all that had transpired. After years of enduring pain, it felt as though recognition had finally arrived. Yet she understood that the battle was far from finished. Across the hall, Richard remained motionless. He appeared adrift, as though the earth had given way beneath his feet. Stella attempted to tug him away, yet he shrugged her off, visibly unsettled. As Claire turned to leave, the sound of Stella's voice rose in a heated exchange with Richard. Their voices were hushed, yet she sensed the unraveling of their connection. Even though she felt a sense of relief as the truth started to emerge, Claire understood that the struggle was still ongoing. Following the turmoil in the courtroom, a transformation started to unfold. Richard stood out in a way that Claire found impossible to overlook. He began attending supervised visits consistently, always arriving with something special for the boys. It wasn't always about lavish toys, but rather meaningful gifts that reflected true consideration. A book that captured Lucas's heart, a soccer ball that thrilled Liam, vibrant colored pencils for Noah, and a captivating puzzle that intrigued Oliver. Initially, the boys approached the situation with caution, yet Richard's unwavering patience started to foster a true bond. He engaged with them, participated in their activities, and even settled on the floor to assist in assembling puzzles or creating drawings. Claire observed from afar, ever vigilant, yet she couldn't resist the allure of the boys. The laughter flowed freely, unrestrained and heartfelt. On a sunny afternoon, Richard arrived with a kite, eager to show the boys the art of flying it. Claire found herself observing with heightened attention. The breeze was just right, and the boys dashed through the park, striving to keep the kite soaring, while Richard encouraged them with enthusiastic cheers. Liam, ever the fierce competitor, succeeded in keeping it airborne the longest and erupted with delight. Richard embraced him with great enthusiasm, and Claire beheld a moment she never imagined she would see. Richard appeared truly joyful. As the weeks passed, Claire recognized that Richard's efforts were not just temporary. He started to engage with the boys' everyday experiences, inquiring about their classes, friendships, and even their minor challenges. He guided Noah through an art class, supported Oliver as he conquered challenging new vocabulary, and cheered for Lucas's achievements in a math game. These moments may not have been spectacular, yet they revealed Richard's authentic presence. Even so, Claire continued to exercise caution. She understood that regardless of Richard's apparent dedication, a past filled with letdowns loomed large and could not be overlooked. Nevertheless, one could not help but observe the change. As the evening settled in and the kitchen was being put back in order after dinner, Richard quietly stepped in to lend a hand. As he finally broke the silence, his voice emerged as a soft murmur, barely audible. "Thank you for allowing me to be a part of their journey, Claire. I understand it's beyond what I merit." Claire took a brief moment to gather her thoughts, the plate resting in her hand. She felt the urge to deliver a biting remark, a reminder that there were still many debts to settle between them. Yet, as she gazed upon him, sincerity shone through. He had lost the self-assured, brash demeanor that she remembered from before. He was a man striving to make amends, even if the moment had passed him by. "They are filled with joy. That's what matters," she said, glancing back at the sink. Yet, beneath the surface, she recognized her own happiness in the sight of her children's smiles. As time went on, Richard's presence felt like a part of the boys' lives. During a game, Lucas was the first to unexpectedly call him Daddy. Richard paused, visibly touched, yet he chose to keep it understated. He offered a warm smile and kept on playing ball with them. Before long, the others began to mirror Lucas's actions, and Claire sensed that something authentic was unfolding. Despite the deepening connection, Claire maintained her sense of independence. She persevered in nurturing the boys independently, making certain that her position as their mother was honored. To her astonishment, Richard appeared to grasp this and consistently respected the limits she established. He offered assistance, yet remained unobtrusive. On a serene evening, Richard presented a photo album. He passed it to Claire, detailing that it held memories from his youth that he wished to share with the boys. Claire turned the pages of the album while Richard narrated the story behind each photo, and the boys absorbed every word with keen interest. In that unassuming moment, Claire realized that Richard was making an effort, not only with the boys but with her as well. As everything transpired, Stella remained steadfast in her refusal to embrace the changing dynamics. Following the court revelations, her grip on Richard had significantly weakened, igniting a fierce anger within her. The sting of rejection was compounded by the weight of public humiliation. She felt a deep sense of frustration watching Richard forge a new bond with Claire and the boys, all while she remained on the periphery. Stella started devising her next strategy. For weeks, she meticulously collected information, weaving a web of influence in the shadows to devise a strategy that would disrupt the delicate harmony emerging between them. In her thoughts, Claire held herself responsible for it all, viewing the boys as hurdles she had to overcome to reclaim Richard's affection. As Claire and Richard began to forge a bond resembling friendship and the boys adjusted to their father's presence, Stella decided it was time to act. One day, Claire found herself answering a call from a number she didn't recognize. On the other end, a chilling voice remarked, "Do you truly believe this peace will endure? Anticipate the unfolding of what lies ahead." Claire recognized the voice immediately. Her heart raced, yet she remained resolute, determined not to reveal any trace of fear. She ended the call abruptly and went back to the living room, where the boys were engaged in play with Richard. She understood that Stella would not back down without a struggle. Yet this time, Claire was prepared to stand her ground. In the meantime, Stella persisted in her plotting, resolute in her mission to undermine the bond shared by Richard, Claire, and the boys. In her mind, the court's ruling was merely a pause, and she was ready to take any measures necessary to drive them asunder. The moments spent together with Richard and the boys started to form a fresh rhythm in their lives. Claire, always watchful, permitted him to engage with the children while she kept a close eye on them. Richard accepted the conditions she imposed without a word of complaint. He appeared truly committed to demonstrating that he could be a reliable figure in their lives. Initially, Claire maintained a strong emotional wall around herself. She observed Richard engaging with the boys, constantly vigilant for any indications that he might depart once more. However, as the weeks passed, it became more evident that Richard was truly striving to change. He engaged with the boys in more than just play. He focused on the details. He assisted Lucas in constructing a robot for a school project, guided Liam in mastering the art of kicking a ball with accuracy, motivated Oliver to conquer his fear of heights at the playground, and admired Noah's artwork, meticulously organizing them in a folder he consistently had on hand. One afternoon, as the children frolicked in the backyard, Richard graciously volunteered to assist Claire with dinner. Initially, she wavered, but ultimately succumbed. Though he appeared awkward while chopping vegetables, he persevered with determination. "I never imagined you in the kitchen," Claire remarked, her voice laced with irony. Richard chuckled, persisting in his clumsy attempt to chop the carrot. "I realize that I've never had to tackle this before, but I believe it's time for me to learn. Wouldn't you agree?" Claire observed him for a brief moment before turning her attention back to the pot, stirring it with purpose. He possessed an undeniable quality, an essence that captivated her attention. Despite her desire to remain cautious, she found it increasingly difficult to ignore how his small acts of kindness and understanding towards the boys were beginning to shift her viewpoint. That very evening, Richard astonished everyone by revealing a guitar he had brought with him. He settled onto the couch, the boys clustering around him, and started to play. The notes were straightforward yet exact. He performed a playful children's song that brought laughter to the boys, particularly when he stumbled over the lyrics midway. As Claire lingered in the kitchen doorway, a smile crept onto her face, surprising her in its spontaneity. It had been ages since she had witnessed her children so at ease and joyful. As the weeks passed, the boys formed connections with Richard that Claire had not foreseen. Liam, ever the quiet one, began inquiring about his father's return the moment he stepped out the door. Noah, the creative soul, delighted in sharing his sketches with Richard, while Lucas eagerly invited him to join in video game sessions nearly every day. Oliver, still timid, trailed behind Richard, imitating his movements as though he aspired to mirror him completely. The transformation was unmistakable, yet Claire found herself grappling with her own feelings. A part of her felt joy watching the boys forge memories with their father, yet another part remained anxious, worried that it could all unravel at any moment. Richard appeared to have undergone a change, yet one must wonder if this shift is lasting. Was there a chance she could find it in her heart to forgive him and allow him to draw nearer? One morning, as they enjoyed the park, Richard settled next to Claire on a bench. The young lads dashed about, flinging a frisbee back and forth with glee. He exhaled softly and regarded her with a grave demeanor. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Claire. I understand that granting me another opportunity wasn't a simple decision. She maintained her gaze on the boys while answering with sincerity. It's not a matter of trust, Richard. It's focused on them. They require consistency, and I cannot afford the chance of you vanishing once more. Richard acknowledged with a nod, grasping the situation. I understand, but I'm present and I have no intention of leaving. Despite her inclination to question him, Claire acknowledged that he had upheld every promise he made since his return. Perhaps, just perhaps, he genuinely devoted himself to being an involved father. One evening, as he settled the boys for the night, Richard found himself on the floor of their room, cradling a weathered photo album he had brought along. The children were filled with curiosity about their father's childhood, and he appeared enthusiastic to recount his stories. As a child, I found immense joy in constructing various creations, he started, leafing through the album. Once, my father gifted me a toy toolbox, and I dedicated weeks to constructing a small house in the backyard. Naturally, it fell apart after the initial downpour, yet it was the most enjoyable experience I had ever encountered. The boys chuckled, and Lucas inquired, "Can you create something with us, Dad?" Richard beamed. "Absolutely, we can kick things off next weekend." As he wove his tales, one specific memory captivated Oliver's focus. Richard presented an image of himself alongside a construction toy, and Oliver was utterly enthralled. He started inquiring about the mechanics of the toy, and Richard took the time to elucidate each aspect with care. From the doorway, Claire observed the glimmer in Oliver's eyes and sensed the significance of a unique moment taking shape. Once the boys drifted off to sleep, Claire quietly entered to switch off the lights. Richard remained on the floor, gazing at the album with a wistful smile. He expressed his gratitude without lifting his gaze. "They are providing me with something I never realized I was missing." Claire took her time before replying. She merely nodded and exited, leaving him behind in the room. Yet, beneath the surface, she sensed a transformation occurring within her as well. Perhaps it was time to reevaluate what she had deemed unthinkable, extending forgiveness to him. The following morning, Richard showed up with an array of tools and materials, ready to construct a charming wooden playhouse alongside the boys. The backyard quickly came alive with joyous laughter and the awkward rhythm of hammering as the four of them collaborated harmoniously. From the porch, Claire found herself smiling effortlessly. This transcended a mere project. It represented a larger movement that was beginning to unfold. Even with all the advancements, Claire remained hesitant. She sensed that Stella still lingered in the shadows, and at any moment, something could shatter the delicate tranquility they were starting to establish. For the moment, she decided to savor the here and now. As the boys slumbered that night, Claire pondered the myriad transformations that had unfolded in recent weeks. Richard had transformed into someone entirely different from the man she once knew years ago. Despite his imperfections, he appeared truly dedicated to engaging in his children's lives. Maybe it was time to ease her defenses, just a bit. Meanwhile, Stella, seething over the increasing bond between Richard and Claire, meticulously devised her next strategy. For her, this deepening connection posed a significant danger to all that she had constructed with Richard. This time, she was resolute in her quest for victory. In Claire's home, the days revealed a fresh rhythm. She and Richard had surprisingly found a way to live harmoniously together. Even though emotional barriers remained, their conversations flowed more easily, and the time spent with the boys showed that a shift was occurring. In contrast to the past, Richard demonstrated a newfound patience and sincere commitment to being a present figure, all while allowing things to unfold naturally. One afternoon, while Claire was busy preparing lunch, Richard entered the kitchen, an envelope in hand. "Claire, may I have a moment of your time?" She regarded him with a cautious gaze, yet offered a subtle nod. He set the envelope down on the counter, a silence hanging in the air before he uttered a word. When he finally spoke, his tone was more composed than she had anticipated. "This time, I understand that my previous refusals to assist have been noted, but I assure you, things have changed. I want you to accept this, he said, sliding the envelope toward her. Claire opened it and found a check inside. The amount was significant, enough to cover months of bills and expenses for the boys. She immediately shook her head. Richard, I don't need this. I've always managed to take care of them on my own, and I'll keep doing so. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but his gaze remained steady. I believe in you, Claire. I recognize the immense effort you've put in to provide them with everything they need. However, this goes beyond mere financial considerations. It's about my genuine involvement in their lives. I hope this doesn't weigh heavily on you. She paused, reflecting on his words in thoughtful silence. The former Richard would have presented the money with an air of superiority, as though it were the answer to every dilemma. Yet now, there was an unmistakable change in him. It wasn't a matter of superiority. It was a sense of modesty. After a moment of contemplation, she finally responded, folding the check and returning it to the envelope. Richard took her response in stride, not pushing further, which caught Claire off guard. He was truly beginning to honor the limits she had established. As the weeks passed, Richard's dedication became more and more apparent. He was offering more than just financial assistance. He played a significant role in the boys' everyday experiences. He accompanied them to school, assisted with their homework, and even gained insights from Claire on managing the minor upheavals of daily life, such as tantrums or broken toys. For Claire, it was unexpected to witness someone who had once appeared so aloof now fully immersed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Richard and Claire found solace on the porch, the gentle sounds of slumbering boys filling the air after a long day. The moon cast a gentle glow over the backyard, where the tools from constructing the wooden playhouse remained strewn about. You know, I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation, Richard remarked, shattering the quietude. Claire cast a sidelong look at him, intrigued. Could you clarify what you mean? Here, alongside you, alongside them. For years, I was consumed by my job and the demands of others, blinding me to what truly held significance. As I strive to set things straight, I find myself pondering why it took me such an extended period to reach this point. Claire folded her arms, resting against the doorframe. It's often in the moments of near loss that we come to understand the true value of what we hold dear. Richard nodded, yet his expression conveyed a deeper meaning. He paused momentarily before proceeding. Claire, I have something important to share regarding the events that unfolded at the altar. Her body tightened with anticipation. For years, she had borne the weight of that day, and while some scars had started to fade, others still throbbed with intensity. Despite that, she nodded, indicating for him to proceed. My mother didn't merely persuade me to cancel the wedding. He halted for a moment, inhaling deeply. She warned that she would withdraw all financial assistance. She remarked that if I were to marry you, I would find myself alone. Claire's eyes widened in astonishment. So you walked away because you feared losing her wealth? It wasn't solely about the money, he replied swiftly. It encompassed all that one could desire. She dictated every facet of my existence. I acted with cowardice, Claire. I chose to escape rather than confront it. I understand that this doesn't justify my actions, but you deserve honesty. Claire experienced a blend of frustration and empathy. The fragments were at last aligning, yet the recollection remained just as agonizing. You should have told me back then, she said, her voice thick with feeling. We might have confronted it side by side. I would have been there for you. I understand, Richard replied. His eyes brimmed with regret, yet I was naive and foolish. I chose poorly, and the consequences haunt me daily. The stillness enveloping them was thick, yet Claire sensed a fracture deep within her. It wasn't the sort of truth that wiped away years of pain, yet it was a movement forward, a modest movement maybe, but a movement nonetheless. She gazed at him and let out a soft sigh. I'm uncertain if I can ever truly forgive you, Richard, but at least I now understand the truth of what transpired. He nodded, embracing her words with a sense of humility. That's everything I could hope for. The following morning, As the boys dashed forward to embrace Richard upon his arrival, Claire observed from afar. After a long stretch of time, she sensed that a true transformation was unfolding, one that promised to be positive. The journey stretched out before them, yet perhaps, just perhaps, this family was beginning to find its unity at last. The courtroom was filled to capacity once more. Claire arrived early, holding Amelia's hand firmly, her attorney and companion. She inhaled deeply, striving to maintain her composure. Upon discovering the reality of her abandonment at the altar, she experienced a sense of grounding, yet forgiveness for Richard remained elusive. The strain between them had diminished, yet the burden of the legal struggle continued to weigh heavily on her mind. Richard made his entrance alongside his attorney. On that particular day, he possessed an unmistakable quality that set him apart. He appeared increasingly earnest, more intent. He had transformed into someone entirely different from the man Claire had once known years ago. Stella, in contrast, was strikingly missing. Her absence loomed large, yet no one appeared to ponder the reason behind it. Claire believed that following the earlier disclosures, Stella had opted to withdraw to spare herself from additional embarrassment. The judge took the bench, and the proceedings commenced. The attorneys for each side delivered their final arguments. Amelia, ever perceptive, highlighted the deep emotional connection Claire had forged with the boys, noting her role as the sole steady parental presence in their lives. Richard's attorney, conversely, contended that he was now dedicated to being an active father, and that his participation was crucial for the children's growth. As Richard took the stand, Claire observed him intently. He expressed himself with composure, acknowledging his errors and owning up to his decisions. He recognized Claire's uncertainties, yet conveyed his resolve to gain her confidence and that of his kids. He mentioned that he doesn't anticipate Claire to forgive him immediately. "I'm here because I aim to be the father my children deserve, and I refuse to give up on them." Richard's voice resonated throughout the space. Claire experienced a surge of feelings, yet she kept them hidden. It remained challenging to completely trust his motives, yet there was an air of sincerity about him. As Claire prepared to speak, she rose, her hands shaking as she adjusted her dress. Yet, her voice remained unwavering. "For 5 years, I had been all that my children relied on. I nurtured them independently, confronting obstacles that only a solo parent can truly comprehend. They hold the utmost importance in my life, and I will consistently strive to make decisions that benefit them the most. If that entails including Richard in their lives, I'm open to the idea. However, I want to emphasize that my trust is not something I will offer lightly." The judge absorbed every word, carefully considering the arguments presented by each side. Following several hours of contemplation, he came back with his verdict. The primary custody will continue to be held by Miss Claire. Nonetheless, Richard will receive consistent visitation rights and will be actively involved in the children's development. It is essential for both parents to collaborate in fostering the well-being of their children. Claire experienced a blend of relief and doubt. It was the most measured choice, yet she couldn't shake off the concern about its long-term implications. Richard, in contrast, appeared appreciative. He regarded Claire with a subtle smile, which she acknowledged with a quick nod. As the courtroom emptied following the hearing, Stella made an unexpected entrance. She stood with a determined look, her gaze locked on Richard. "Do you honestly believe you can embody the ideal father figure at this point?" she inquired, her voice laced with irony. Richard locked eyes with her, his demeanor serene. "I will make an effort, and that is what counts." Stella chuckled, yet a trace of bitterness lingered in her tone. "Wishing you the best with that endeavor. You must navigate this path independently now." She pivoted and strode off, signaling unmistakably that this chapter was closed. For Claire, it was a welcome sight to see her leave. In the absence of Stella's meddling, progress could finally unfold free from any manipulation or theatrics. Later that same day, Richard made his way to Claire's house. He yearned to see the boys, yet he also felt compelled to have a conversation with her. Upon his arrival, the boys welcomed him with warm embraces, clearly familiar with their father's presence. Claire, on the other hand, lingered in the kitchen, silently watching from afar. Once the children retreated to their room, Richard made his way over. He appeared uncertain, yet resolute. "Claire, may I have a moment of your time?" With a nod, she guided him into the living room. They settled into the couch and he started to share his thoughts. "I appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the boys' lives. I understand that this journey has been challenging for you, but there's an important point I must express." Claire furrowed her brow, a blend of intrigue and wariness evident on her face. "What is it exactly?" Richard inhaled deeply before responding. "My feelings for you remain strong. I have always done so. I realize the timing may not be ideal, but it was important for me to share this with you. Let's enjoy ourselves with those who merely skim through the comments. Drop a milkshake in the comments. Only those who reach this point will truly comprehend. Now, let us return to the narrative." Claire was taken aback by his words. She gazed at him, attempting to comprehend the weight of his words. For years, she bore the weight of his abandonment, yet remnants of the love she had once cherished lingered within her. Listening to this now filled her with inner turmoil. "Richard, I'm at a loss for words," she admitted candidly. "Much has transpired. This is not an issue that can be resolved by mere words." He acknowledged, a melancholic smile gracing his lips. "I'm not requesting anything. I simply wish to convey this to you, and if there comes a time when you're prepared to reflect on what lies beyond the past, know that I will be here." Claire remained quiet, and Richard chose not to press her. He rose, bid good night, and departed. As he turned to leave, Claire was engulfed by a whirlwind of feelings. On one hand, she felt a sense of relief wash over her as the truth finally came to light. On the flip side, she was aware that there remained an abundance to unravel. She observed the boys engaged in their play within the confines of their room and resolved that, for the moment, her attention would be directed towards them. Richard sought to reconcile, hoping that perhaps one day she might reflect on his words. For the time being, her focus was on safeguarding and nurturing her children. As the months rolled by since the final hearing, Claire and Richard found their routine evolving into something distinctly different. His presence grew more significant, not only in the boys' lives but also in Claire's everyday routine. Their relationship, which started with a focus on the children, gradually began to transform. Easygoing lunches, late-night talks, and treasured moments with the guys turned into a norm, something neither of them had imagined could happen. On a sunny day at the park, as the boys enjoyed the slide, Richard made his way over to Claire. He appeared anxious, which was atypical for him. Claire had been contemplating, he started cautiously, our relationship about everything surrounding it. She gazed at him, anticipating his next words. "How does this sound, Richard? Perhaps we ought to give it another shot. Not for the sake of the boys, but because it's something I desire. I aim to demonstrate that I can be the person you truly deserve." Claire paused, her gaze locked on the boys in the distance. The time they had shared revealed to her that Richard had genuinely transformed. He exhibited a greater sense of humility and patience, and in spite of all the pain, a part of her sensed that it could be worthwhile to consider a second chance. "It won't be simple, Richard," she finally remarked. "We have much to navigate together." He nodded, a faint smile gracing his lips. "I understand, but I'm prepared to go to any lengths necessary." The upcoming months marked a new beginning. Richard and Claire embarked on a journey to rediscover their relationship, now infused with maturity, with their sons at the heart of their lives. Minor acts transformed into meaningful symbols. A meal he prepared after a tiring day, a note of support she shared during his work struggles, and the quiet times filled with laughter as their kids frolicked in the yard. One sunny day, Richard decided to take Claire and the boys on a delightful picnic amidst a vibrant field of flowers just outside the city. The day unfolded under a radiant sun, the sky a flawless canvas of blue, accompanied by a soft, whispering breeze. As the boys dashed through the blossoms, Richard invited Claire to join him for a stroll. He clutched an object in his hands, shrouding it in mystery. Upon arriving at a hidden location that offered a stunning panorama of the field, Richard paused and gazed into her eyes. Claire, you are the one who revealed to me the essence of genuine love, not only for myself but also for our children. Your presence inspires me to strive for improvement, to become a better man and a better father. I desire for this opportunity to endure endlessly. Would you do me the honor of becoming my spouse? He opened a small box, unveiling a modest yet exquisite ring that appeared to embody the genuineness of his words. Claire sensed the sting of tears beginning to form in her eyes. For an eternity, she had envisioned how she would respond if an event like this ever unfolded. Yet here, in this instant, the solution was evident. Absolutely, Richard, I will. The boys, observing from afar, witnessed the unfolding scene and dashed forward, exclaiming with delight. Lucas was the first to inquire, Mommy, are you tying the knot? Will we truly become a genuine family? Claire chuckled softly, bending down to embrace them. Indeed, my dear ones, we are about to become a family. In the ensuing months, the wedding preparations unfolded with a delightful blend of laughter and charming chaos, particularly as the boys eagerly insisted on lending a hand with every detail. The momentous occasion unfolded in a quaint garden, embraced by the warmth of dear friends and family. The boys were involved in every aspect. Lucas held the rings, Noah adorned everything with flowers, Liam delivered a charming speech, and Oliver escorted Claire down the aisle. As Claire and Richard exchanged their vows, it seemed that the shadows of the past had finally been put to rest. They faced a future they had crafted side by side, triumphing over each obstacle that came their way. Following the ceremony, the family gathered to celebrate with their cherished ones. The children dashed through the garden, their laughter echoing, while Claire and Richard twirled gracefully beneath the twinkling strings of lights. He embraced her tightly, murmuring, I assure you, Claire, I will bring joy to you and the boys every single day of my existence. She smiled, her heart buoyant, a sensation it hadn't experienced in years. At this moment, Richard, our connection is what truly counts. That evening, just before settling down for the night, the boys delighted their parents with a heartfelt surprise. An album brimming with drawings that captured joyful family memories. On the final page, they had inscribed in bold, awkward letters, Our family is forever. Claire gently shut the album, cradling it against her heart. After years of struggle, she finally sensed that the path, once filled with anguish, had blossomed into something truly beautiful. A family forged in love, nurtured by patience, and defined by the courage to begin anew. Do you believe Claire's choice to forgive Richard was the correct one? We'd love to hear your insights in the comments section. Please provide a rating for this story on a scale from 0 to 10. What's your rating? Be sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to stay updated on all our narratives. Explore more heartfelt tales by clicking here on the end screen.